Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beat the Big Guys. I'm your host, Sandy Rosenthal, and today my guest is from the great city of New York City, and his name is Professor Leonard Cassuto. Professor, did I pronounce that right?
You bet.
Okay, yay, we're off to a good start. So, for some of my guests who may not know all about you, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction, and then it will be the good professor's time to shine. So, Professor Leonard Cassuto wears many hats. He's a professor of American literature at Fordham University, a well known voice of reform in the graduate school world, and encompassing all of these, he's a writer. His brand new book, Academic Writing as If Readers Matter, highlights the conflicted roles in higher education. American professors have always been both teachers and researchers, but over the past two generations, research has gained the upper hand at the expense of educating the students. So, with that, is it okay if I call you Len?
You bet.
Okay, well, take it away, Len. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandy, and thanks for having me on this podcast. I'm really grateful to be here, grateful for the chance to talk about some of the things that I do. And well, let's start with the new book. The This book, Academic Writing as If Readers Matter, is both its own thing and it's also an outgrowth of the work that I've been doing really in earnest for the last 15 years or so as a higher ed reformer focused on, but not limited to, the graduate school space. But let me talk about this book to begin with. That I'm calling it Academic Writing as If Readers Matter because that's really where the rubber meets the road for me. Last week, I saw a revival of a play by George Bernard Shaw off Broadway. It's called The Devil's Disciple. And there's a line in that play that says where one character says that the single greatest complication that attaches to communication, I'm paraphrasing here, is the illusion that it has taken place. And I thought that was a great line. And one of the reasons I thought it was a great line is because it speaks so resonantly to the work that I've been doing and the book that I've just published. So academic writing and readers don't often appear, at least not often enough, in the same sentence. And that's because too much academic writing is done without the reader in mind.
Hmm.
Now, when a writer, any writer with a serious purpose, sits down, does research, writes some stuff down, gathers information, puts it out there, that's a noble effort. But if it's out there and no reader picks up on it, then that's the illusion that communication took place. It didn't really happen. The writer may think that it did, but if no reader connects with what was produced, then that's not communication. It's a job of work, certainly, but it isn't communication. And that failure of communication is a failure to make the world a little bit bigger, for the writer to spread whatever it is that they may have found. So too much academic writing fits that category. That is, it's representative of commendable effort and insight, smarts. Lots of academic writers are smart people, but they're not connecting with their readers because they don't realize that they need to on some level, or maybe they're afraid to. And I was been thinking about why this was so. This was the seed that germinated that eventually produced this book. And I started thinking about how there's a primal scene for academic writing, and that primal scene is some student writing some paper for some teacher someplace. And of course, that scene is reiterated many times. That's how most of us learn to write. And so it's a socializing process. When you repeat the primal scene enough times, people are socialized into a certain world of writing that some of them continue through college, graduate school, and beyond. Or if you're me, you do it your whole life. So, and I want to say that academic writing in this sense is just writing with seriousness of purpose. It doesn't mean you have to be a graduate student. It doesn't mean you have to be a college student. It's just if you're writing with some kind of serious purpose to communicate something to somebody. But in the primal scene that I just described, it has a characteristic I think that is so often ignored because people just get used to looking at this image of a student writing a paper for a teacher. The teacher's getting paid to read it. And the fact that the audience is being paid communicates in a very concrete and literal way that the writer doesn't have to work for the audience's attention. The reader is already being paid to deliver that attention. That's what the teacher is supposed to do. Read your work and get paid for it. Give you some feedback, certainly. So what does it mean that you have generations of writers who are being taught to write as though the audience doesn't matter? Well, we see that result. That it means that writers are taught that communication is not essential, that you only have to do the work because the teacher is going to do the rest. Well, that's not commonly the case. That outside of school, certainly, and even within school, if you get far enough, it's not going to be worth your while to assume that the reader is somebody you can take for granted. That anybody can write better if they think more about who they're writing for and what that reader needs. That's what this book is about on a craft level. And so on a craft level, there's a lot of advice and a lot of tips for how to envision the reader and how to meet the reader's needs after you've discerned as well as you can what you think they are. And that this is an important set of skills for any writer to acquire. So, okay, fine, that's craft. But this book is not limited to craft. I also am arguing, and here this book is contiguous with all of the reform work that I've been doing for more than 10 years. It's an argument that we need to do this. We need to do this because communication builds community. And community is essential, not only if we're going to do intellectual work, but also if we're going to live as a properly functioning society, as a properly functioning democracy, if you want. So there's a real sort of there's a we to this. I think that writers are way too accustomed to thinking of themselves as an I who's doing the writing. If I do a good job, good for me. If I do a bad job, bad for me. But particularly in the area of what I'm calling academic writing, we're all in this together. That academics write for all other academics, and academia exists or ought to exist in a symbiotic mutual caretaking relationship with society at large. And that caretaking relationship is quite obviously breaking down before us. We can see in recent months even show trials of college presidents before Congress, followed by summary executions. That's a sign of a breakdown of trust. And the breakdown of trust is preceded by a breakdown in communication. So if we write better, it's not going to solve every problem we've got, but it's certainly going to be a step in the right direction. And if we think of writing as a communal, social act, not as an individual action, but as a social act, then we can all start moving towards the light here. And we can maybe become better citizens, better engineers of our own democracy. Plus, colleges and universities will be better places to work because the writing will be more enjoyable to read and we'll be able to learn more easily and more richly from it. And so in that sense, this is connected to the work that I've been doing to try to make graduate school more student-centered, more responsive, because I think that there's an ethic that is behind all of this. This is what I've really been working very hard to try to propagate on many levels. It's a caretaking ethic. Writers need to take care of their readers. Schools need to take care of their students. societies need to take care of their schools. And if we pay more attention to mutual caretaking, then we can be more constructive and more productive.
I think that's beautiful. Professor, would this be, excuse me, Len, would this be a good time for me to ask a question?
Step right in.
Okay, thank you.
Water's warm.
Thank you. So, so if I've understood you properly, and I've been listening carefully, um, what you're saying is, let's say I'm an undergraduate, upper graduate level student. Is this graduate level, also undergraduate level you're talking about,
Oh,
Professor? Both. Okay.
yeah,
So
it's
here I
the
am,
absolute.
and I have both a undergraduate and graduate degree. So here I am, I'm sitting in class, and I'll admit that when I wrote a paper, I was more focused on writing a paper to make sure that my professor knew I understood what he or she was telling me. And when I was in college, I didn't try to challenge my professor. I didn't try to tell my professor he or she was wrong. And because I would get a bad grade.
Mhm.
So have I encapsulated what you're trying to say, that what I as a was a student would try to do? And
Well, let's take that scenario that
okay,
where
okay.
you're a student and you're trying to essentially psych out your teacher. You're trying to figure out, is your teacher somebody who can be disagreed with? And I will say with some embarrassment that not every professor is somebody who you can constructively engage in this way. You can say, "Hey, professor, I disagree with this idea that you put out there, and here's why." And that some of them are going to get pretty defensive. And you're a student, you want to get a good grade. You think, "Hey, I think that my professor's going to bristle if I try to push back. So I'm not going to try to push back. I'm going to go with the flow instead. I'm going to write what I think he wants to hear." Well, that there's a way that what's going on there is you have a writer who is making an honest and responsible attempt to understand the ways of their reader.
I
So,
think so.
uh, so I'm not going to tell that student, "Oh, you need to be brave. Step up there and get yourself get yourself into the target range of slings and arrows." So why do that if
Mhm.
your goal is something different?
Len, I'm even aware of some students that have been labeled insubordinate by
Yeah,
professors
well,
for what you've just described.
that's embarrassing too. But I want to say also there are plenty of professors in the world of academia, plenty of teachers in the world of K through 12 who want very much to see their students
Well,
push
that's
back,
encouraging.
want
Um,
who want who because for them that's a sign not only of learning, but also that the student is going to go out and be a person with their own mind.
so,
We're a large population here, and in any large population of any group of people, you're going to find good and bad behavior. I hope that academia has more good actors than bad, and I believe that it does. But I'm not going to say, and nobody with any sense would say of any workplace, that there are no bad actors here.
agreed. So, but this is a great discussion. So, Professor Len, so is there a way that the structure of universities and colleges can be changed so that students have more freedom to stand up and have a rollicking conversation, discussion with the professor, even when they don't agree? Because I think you would agree with me on this, that deans tend to give a lot of indulgence to professors to fail who they want and to label insubordinate who they want. And deans will not step in. So,
So I'm going to push back on you a little bit here.
okay, great.
I think that if you look at at current practice in colleges and universities, you're seeing, especially on the undergraduate level, a lot more respect for students who are feeling upset, offended, or insulted. Now, I'm concerned because I don't believe that in every case the those concerns are equal. For example, if a discussion is making a student uncomfortable, that's not necessarily a bad thing. that that college, school in general, not just college, I think is a place for useful and supported discomfort. No student should feel unsafe, but I think that lots of students should, in lots of settings, be made to feel uncomfortable if that discomfort is going to produce education, knowledge, self-awareness, awareness of what's going on around you that is enhanced. The road to wisdom is not always a smooth road, but I think that students need to be supported as they travel that road at every point. But the idea that they should always be comfortable, that I think is a misconception. And so I don't think that every complaint that a student makes is equally legitimate, but I do see a movement which is mostly positive towards privileging the student experience in higher education in a way that it never used to be privileged before. Now, what I would like to see more of is an emphasis on precise on communication where we all understand each other, and bad writing is one of the root causes of a lack of that kind of understanding. And sometimes it's just, you're trying to make the reader understand something and they miss it. Maybe you're being too abstract because you don't recognize the necessary relation of the abstract to the concrete, that without the concrete, the abstract is blurry. It doesn't make sense. And so you have a lot of theorists who forget when they're writing for their academic peers, or perhaps even for wider audiences than that, that you need concrete illustrations of abstractions if they're going to be persuasive and in many cases even understood. That's one of the tips that I'm offering in this book. But as you can see, it's a tip that has social value. It's not just craft value. It's going to try to aim to shore up relationships that are fraying. Professors and students need to trust each other more than they do. And one of the ways that that's going to happen is if there's more transparency between them. And the primary responsibility for that rests with teachers. Teachers have more power. They're in front of the room, and they need to be pretty transparent about what they're learning, what the learning objectives are in a given setting, so that students can know what they're getting into, and be able to appreciate perhaps the moments of discomfort. For example, and here I give a concrete example of the abstract that I just provided. I teach a course on disgust. I team teach it with a psychologist, Dean McKay, and it's I think a really valuable piece of work we do together. It's called the Literature and Psychology of Disgust. Professor McKay is a psychologist, and it's an interdisciplinary pairing. And one of the things we say on the first day to our students is, you're not always going to be comfortable here, because some of the examples that we're going to be bringing forward are designed to make you uncomfortable so that we can study the discomfort that's being produced and learn something about how we relate to each other as individuals, as family members, as group members, as citizens, that studying the emotion of disgust can teach us all about those things. But if you think that you can't take it, then we are not going to be upset if you want to walk away. No hard feelings, no offense taken. But if you stay with the understanding that it's not always going to be comfortable every day here. So we need to respect each other. We need to learn from the discomfort. So this is, I think, an example of mutual respect when it takes place. The students will sometimes ask questions about this. It's communication, it's transparency. So, and it's contiguous with the message of academic writing as if readers matter. Because if teachers teach as though students don't matter, then not much teaching is going to happen, but a lot of other unpleasant emotions will substitute in its place. Resentment and anger, chief among those. So when we're talking about academic writing, when I'm talking about academic writing, I'm talking about something much bigger. It is part of a larger need for civic engagement and mutual caretaking. It's an ethic.
Agreed. Totally agreed. So, Len, I think this would be a fabulous place to, speaking of abstract as opposed to concrete. If I can take just 15 seconds to talk about a campaign that my organization, levies.org, has spearheaded. We believe that every engineering student in in undergraduate school needs to be exposed to engineering failures. They need to receive instruction on engineering failures and the lessons that they can learn from those. And right now in this country, there is no requirement that students somewhere in their 4 years of working on their degree receive such instruction, which is, again, a concrete example. So does that fit in with what you're talking about, Lem?
Oh, certainly, yes. The now what we this goes to an important aspect of what I've been talking about, but I haven't gotten to it yet. You say, well, okay, why is so much academic writing so difficult? Why is it so
data dense and
yeah, unnecessarily dense?
dense?
Yeah. And so I think that we can hypothesize that in some cases the writer is fearful of being understood. That now part of the socialization in academia is you want to demonstrate that you're smart, that whether you're an undergraduate who's taking an introductory class, or a graduate student writing a dissertation, or a faculty member who is trying to get promoted to the next level, or maybe just get a wider audience for their next article or book. There's this idea that academia is a culture of smarty pantses, and that you have to show that you're smart in order to get to the next level. And it's not entirely untrue, you know. It's that you need to do good work, you need to be reviewed by your peers, and that's part of how you advance. But to show that you're smart, well, you know, Pete Seeger once said, any damn fool can get complicated. It takes a genius to be simple. And he was talking about Woody Guthrie.
I like that.
So
I like that. I'm writing that one down. Okay.
Sure. Well, hey, you know, that's the book is filled with little nuggets like that. So so this fear of being understood is pervasive through, you know, lots of sort of sections of academia. There's the idea that if you understand me, maybe you'll think I'm stupid. You'll call me out. You'll say that, and you'll embarrass me. The greatest shame is being called out for not being smart. And so you write something that's so dense and abstruse, people think, well, I don't understand this, it must be smart.
Yeah.
And this is
interesting.
So much the wrong way to go. I don't think I need to elaborate on this. It doesn't create understanding.
No.
It creates an unearned respect that's based on not on the content of what somebody wrote, but on its difficulty. So that we need to get away from that, I hope, is understandable. But how did we get to it? And this is part of I think, a dysfunctional aspect of academic culture, where we feel we always need to show ourselves at our best. That when you're a teacher standing in front of the room, it's easy to fear saying, I don't know. When I first started out, and when I wasn't established in the profession, I absolutely feared saying I don't know. When I got a little older, it got easier, and it makes the conversations a lot better if I make clear what I do and what I don't know. But you know, I had to grow into it because the habits of my culture go against that. The habits of academic culture are against I don't know. Now let's circle back from this abstraction to this very concrete idea that anybody's going to be a better engineer if they see how engineers make mistakes, and what causes these mistakes and how they manifest. In fact, if you see the kinds of pitfalls that lead to engineering mistakes, that means you're less likely to fall into those pitfalls yourself. But if you're from a culture that doesn't want to admit failure, that doesn't want to admit that I'm not the smartest builder that ever walked, and that all of my creations, all of my bridges stay up, all of my tunnels never collapse, and so on, then if you can't admit that you never that you're capable of getting it wrong, then you deprive your students of the ability to learn about an experience that they will surely have, which is the experience of getting it wrong.
I
So
completely see the similarity between the thing that I spearheaded. I'm not leading it, but I spearheaded. I started it, but I can see it's meshes very, very well with what you've been talking about for the past 30 minutes. So for let's say someone just signed on to the podcast really late, and so what is your couple of sentences solution for this challenge?
So the solution to the challenge, if for a writer, is take care of your reader. The solution for higher education is let's understand that we are in a mutual caretaking relationship, that society takes care of academia or ought to, and academia takes care of its students or ought to. And when we understand that responsibility, we can call that academic responsibility. And academic responsibility is paired, should be paired, and must be paired with academic freedom, which is a high ideal in American colleges and universities. We deserve it, but we deserve it because that kind of freedom will allow us to do the kind of work that contributes to something bigger than ourselves. And the academic writing as if readers matter is, on its most basic level, how to use writing to create something that will contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
I love it.
That's where
I love it.
and that's where I hope you'll join me.
And it should be with everything we write. There's it might be some of them might be bigger than others, some might be smaller than others, but with everything we write, that should be agreed. Well, I think that beautifully puts a big cherry on top for this conversation. But we've about run out of time. But Len, is there anything else that you would like to add for our listeners before we sign off?
No detail too small, in this sense that that whether you are deciding whether you're using too many semicolons or whether you're going to cut some of the jargon out of the description that you put on page 14, all of each detail is part of something bigger. That is craft. Craft is important. Craft is something that is part of a larger ethic. And we've been talking together about the need to be decent. If you write with the reader in mind, you're being a decent person. Well, it's the same thing. If you're an engineer and you're teaching people about how engineers get it wrong, that's common decency. There is a way here that what I'm talking about, what I've been working on for many years now, is the idea that we need to be kinder and more generous with each other. That the academic writing as if readers matter is, I hope, a number of things. I hope it's a wise ass book. I think it is. I hope it's a wise book. I think it is.
Okay.
And I hope it's a generous book, because in the end, we can do with being more generous to each other.
So to make sure that I understood that right, no deal is too small. I mean, no detail is too small.
Not to contribute to a larger whole that we can build for ourselves together.
Okay, got it. Perfect. So thank you so very much for joining me, Len. This was an amazing conversation. For those of you, Len, would you go ahead and hold your book up? And while we're at it, the unedited version of this podcast will be put up on YouTube on my channel, Sandy Rosenthal. But the book is Academic Writing as If Readers Matter. And wasn't there a subtitle with that as well?
Oh, that's it. And
that's
although
it.
I will add a subtitle that
okay, sure.
Although our conversation has been very earnest and very serious, this book, I tried to make it funny. And I think
Yeah.
I think it is. I hope it is. So I think it's funny in a wise ass kind of way.
Humor is always acceptable. Always. Always. So thank you and thank you to the listeners today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe, rate, and like this podcast on all of your favorite platforms. And remember, no matter who you are, you too can beat the big guys. Okay. And cut.